Welcome to John Martin Talks, where we battle ignorance and apathy daily. The growing ignorance of just how special this experiment we call the United States of America is, and the apathy that we can't or won't do anything and everything to save her. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you had a great weekend. I did. It was beautiful weather here in the state of Florida. We actually got rain on a couple of occasions, which was beautiful because we absolutely needed it. And it was the kind that you get that didn't have a lot of bad storms with it, but just kind of good, steady soaking of the ground. So we really appreciated that yesterday. We got a great show for you today. And oh, by the way, I don't know about you, but I pretty much sheltered at home. I did go out on one occasion to get some supplies, but other than that, I was pretty much at Fort Hawthorne. I spent a lot of time calling friends around different parts of the state, different parts of the country, and I told them the same thing, that they could come and shelter with us if they need be. Just bring their toilet paper and their guns with plenty of ammo, and we would let them into Fort Hawthorne. But we got a great show for you today. We start out with a story that is not directly, I suppose, connected to coronavirus, because everything now is COVID-19. But then again, it is in a way connected to it, because it's about the Burn Man, Bernie Sanders. Does he have a pathway to victory? Because it seems like he needs to make a decision pretty quick as to whether he's going to try to carry his campaign on out forward. Joe Biden, of course, has come out now and said he's going to start vetting VP candidates, and he's informed Bernie of that. He said that Joe said he's going to wear a mask out in public. We'll get a little more in details of that leading up to what appears to be the Wisconsin primary tomorrow, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But does Bernie have a path forward? Democrats, this is an ongoing story that I told you I was going to keep bringing attention to it right up through the election, quite probably. The Democrats are going to try to steal the election if we, the American people, let them. And I'll explain that in just a moment. And when will this virus end? When will coronavirus, COVID-19 end? Well, according to Dr. Fauci, it might not end. And we'll talk about that more specifically. But we start out with a Politico story. Sanders' narrow path to victory gets even narrower, according to Politico. Bernie Sanders insists he has a narrow path to the nomination. We're talking about the Democratic nomination. But he and his aides refuse to say what it is. Well, one of them could be, does Biden drop out? And they actually talk about that here in a minute in the article. That's the only real pathway I see. Now, he's not mathematically eliminated, and we'll get into that as the article unfolds. A majority of the states and territories yet to vote rejected him in 2016. So, in other words, the states that are left on the ballot or in the primaries, a lot of them have been postponed. None of them have been officially canceled yet, so that's a big deal. But he lost a lot of those to Hillary Clinton in 2016. So, and he's actually done worse in 2020 as far as the total amount of votes he's been getting. That's why I've been saying, I told you this a couple of months ago, that the more I looked at the 2020 results as they began to unfold, the more I began to realize that the 2016 competition between Bernie and Hillary was more anti-Hillary vote in the outcome, how well Bernie did, than it was a pro-Bernie Sanders vote. The national polls don't offer much hope either, since Joe Biden defeated him in Arizona, Florida, and Illinois on March 17th. Sanders has trailed him, talking about Joe Biden, by double digits in every single national survey. This is likely true that he's trailing double digits in these polls, but I do remind you, didn't Donald Trump trail? And pretty much, was there any polls where Donald Trump was actually ahead in the 2016 election? I mean, right up till the day that he got elected, there were polls showing that he literally only had about a 2% chance of winning. So we know the polls don't have to always be accurate, but in this case, I think they probably are, in the sense that Biden is poised to continue to crush Bernie. And he has been crushing him ever since it became just the two of them. And I think that says quite a bit about Bernie's topping out level of support. And it shows how desperate the Democrats are for any port in a storm when it comes to Joe Biden. Days before the Wisconsin primary, the last major race on the presidential calendar for weeks, which is supposed to be tomorrow, and I say supposed to be because there's still some challenges out there that may in fact shut it down. But as we understand, it is supposed to be tomorrow. Whoopi Goldberg grilled Sanders on The View. Oh, there's something, man. How many of you want to be grilled by Whoopi Goldberg? Pushing him to explain how he could still capture the nomination, being he, Bernie Sanders. He never spelled it out, instead arguing that people in a democracy have a right to vote and have a right to vote for the agenda that they think can work for America, especially in this very, very difficult moment. Well, I hate to tell you this, Bernie, but they have been voting on your agenda before this corona crisis, and largely they were voting against it. But the bottom line for me, and I've been telling you this for a while, if you're new to the show, first of all, where you been? Secondly, glad to have you. You're in the right place, unless you're looking for political correctness. And I know for a fact I have people watch the show because they've chimed in, and I know some of them personally that support Bernie Sanders. But let me just tell you, Bernie is no different in this case than any other political figure. He's going to stay in until the day he can't raise any more money. The day he can't raise any more money is the day that he absolutely will drop out. If he's still able to raise money, he's going to stay in. That's just the way it is. All these people, when they drop out, it's always because they can't raise any more money. The reason why they stay in for the money is because when you run in these federal elections, and keep in mind, this is Bernie's last shot. I don't think there's any argument about that they get to keep that money. So if they don't spend it on their campaign, they can put it into various accounts where they can use it for all kind of different things. That's why, like pro athletes, for instance, have foundations, because they can spend a lot of that money tax-free. Well, it's a very similar situation for people who run for president. And so when they get where they can't raise any more money and they have to start spending their own money, because they all want to have more money at the end of the campaign than they did at the beginning. So, and Sanders has proven this already. He proved it 4 years ago in 2016 when he dropped out. When he quit raising money, go back and check it out. Don't have to take my word for it. Go back and look at it. When he stopped being able to raise money, he quit. He dropped out. Until that point, he was in all the way. While it's not yet mathematically impossible for him, Bernie Sanders, to win, Sanders would need to amass more than 60% of the remaining delegates to clinch the nomination, a mark he's only hit in 2 states this year, Nevada and his home state of Vermont. Well, let's just face it, that's not going to happen. Not under the current situation. The only way that would be possible is if Joe Biden simply dropped out. Now, Biden, on the other hand, has been winning like 60% of the vote and more since it got to be the two of them. So that just adds more to the burden that Bernie has to clear to win the nomination, not necessarily to raise money, which is the key. Another possible reason for not explaining his long shot course to victory, it depends on something his staff and allies have for the most part only whispered about, and that is an epic Biden collapse. So there could be an epic Biden collapse. Well, I got some good news and bad news for you Bernieites out there on that. There already has been an epic Biden collapse. He has totally collapsed since the campaign ended, basically, since the coronavirus shut it down, since the last debate with Bernie Sanders. Biden has tried to maintain a public persona, and it has been nothing short of a disaster. The problem for Bernie is the media is not really covering it. Yeah, they show it, and they show Biden going blah, 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 blah. I mean, Biden, if you look at it, the teacher on the Peanuts cartoons actually makes more sense than Joe Biden. And you may recall, if you watch those, the teacher on there always goes, wah, 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 wah. I mean, she makes more sense than Joe Biden ever has. But the media is not covering it. They basically show it, and then they don't even say. And if someone, let me back up even further, if someone actually questions the fact that Joe Biden might not be mentally fit to be president, oh, it's oh, they just tell you, oh, you're all this and that. And think about this: if Donald Trump were to have one single moment like Biden has had time after time in the last few weeks, they would be calling for the 25th Amendment all over again. They would say that the president's lost it and he's mentally unfit. I mean, Donald Trump he's had a few gaffes. All human beings have gaffes, but he has never had a moment like Biden has on a routine basis. Look at Donald Trump. Love him, hate the press conferences, love the press conference, indifferent about him. Can you imagine Joe Biden taking questions from reporters for like 2 hours on day to day? Really? You really think that would work for Joe Biden? I don't get it, man. And not being, here's the thing, and Billy Bob, my psychic sidekick, reminded me of this. This is Billy Bob Bass, in case you've just tuned into our show. He helps me keep the videos straight and stuff like that. His a Twitter handle. It's at Billy Bob Bass 1, and mine is at John Martin Talks. And yes, I'm a fish whisperer, and I'm ready to make fishing great again. I hadn't been able to go because of the coronavirus has shut us all down. But let me just say this to you. The fact that Biden has not been able to campaign, in other words, to have public events and all that, has actually helped his chances of winning. And keep in mind, whoever the Democrat is has a very good chance to win. And I know, I get it. I hope you're right. I'm with you 100%. Trump 2020, landslide, all of that. And I do believe if the election were today, that would be true. But always have to keep in mind that the Democrat, whomever that is, it doesn't matter who's running on either side, that Democrat is going to start out in the Electoral College winning California, Illinois, Massachusetts, and New York, and other states as well. But those four major, huge states with huge numbers of Electoral College voters, the Democrat is going to win them automatically. And so it's always tougher for the Republican to thread the needle. But Biden not being able to campaign actually helps him a great deal. But his remarks of talking about Sanders also suggest that Sanders could decide to remain in the race, even absent a path, in hopes of tugging Biden to the left, a task many progressives see as even more critical amid the coronavirus pandemic and economic meltdown. Now, first of all, Biden's handlers they're going to resist this. They're going to try to not let that happen. That's why they don't want any more debates with Bernie Sanders, because of Bernie, he hasn't been very effective at attacking Biden at all, but he has gotten him to agree to many of the socialistic and even right communist philosophies he's had. So the progressive wing of the party, which Bernie clearly dominates, they want to keep the Sanders campaign alive so that they can move the debate even further to the left. Said Larry Cohen, chairman of the Sanders-founded group Our Revolution. That tells you a lot right there. He said about Bernie, he knows he has a mathematical path if he starts to win these primaries, and their primaries he won in 2016. Some of them are sketchy, but he always knows that he is the leader of the progressive Democrats, and there's millions of them left to vote, and delegate count matters in terms of leverage. Well, he's got a point there, but let me just tell you in my words, I don't see how this matters if there's no more campaigning. If Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden can't campaign in a normal way out publicly, and Biden has declared that any of his public, if he's out in public, he'll be wearing a mask, but don't expect there to be any public campaigning. In fact, I don't know that there's going to be any public campaigning in the traditional style all the way through the November elections. I doubt very seriously where that's going to happen, and we're going to talk more about the November elections in just a moment. But I believe that Joe Biden and Donald Trump campaign against each other, which appears to be the way it's going to go, will be through debates only. I don't see them out. I don't think there are going to be any more Trump rallies. I don't think he needs to, first of all. And secondly, he'd get such negative. I mean, think about it. If Trump had a rally and heaven forbid people didn't show up, that would be the coverage of the rally. Because they don't even cover the fact that tens of thousands show up. But if he had a rally and people stayed at home for whatever reason, so I just don't see them having any more rallies for multiple reasons, tied in with the coronavirus. So I really believe that we're going to see debates, and we might not even see them on the same stage with an audience. They may be like, remote debate. I don't know. I suspect they will be together at some point, properly socially distanced. Wonder if Biden will wear a mask then. Sanders hinted at an alternative rationale for staying in the race on Friday when he said on MSNBC that the goal is obviously to win, but the other goal is to be able to continue to fight to give people the opportunity to participate in the political process, to stand up for the views that they believe in. Well, yes, and to raise money, but he wants people to vote because they know they're whipped outside of some kind of miracle. Because let's face it, even if Biden were to potentially drop out, there'd be a big push to draft somebody like Cuomo in there, Andrew Cuomo, and there probably will be anyway. So I just don't see the Democratic Party elite pushing for a Sanders to rise to the top no matter what happens in the Biden campaign. But listen to this paragraph right here, and it explains a lot about why Bernie, beyond the fact, as I keep saying, raising money, it shows you in order for his backers to have negotiating power, they said Sanders needs to receive at least 1,200 delegates going into the convention, which has been postponed to August. And of course, Biden has said it might need to be a virtual convention, and he's probably right about that. Let me just say this. I've been talking a lot to friends and associates over the weekend. I actually don't see anything that involves large public gatherings to happen this year. I don't see it. So like football, NBA or NFL football and college football, I hate to say it, but I don't see it happening. I mean, think about it this way, and this ties into the convention. Even if the best case scenario happens with this COVID-19 coronavirus, and let's say 2 months from now, they basically say that it's tampered down. I don't see them having a vaccine anytime soon. It's going to take at minimum a year. Normally it takes about 2 years for a vaccine to actually go from being approved basically through the process to being developed and used on a wide scale basis. Take at least 2 years. They could chop that in half, but then you're still looking at literally a year from now. But let's say that they come out and say, okay, you don't have to maintain your social distance anymore. It's okay. And I'm not advocating for this. I'm just giving you a speculation. Would you really, let's just use football as an example. If you're a diehard like college football fan like me, would you say 2 months from now, if they say you can go and do whatever you want to, would you really want to go sit in a crowd with 50 to 80,000 people shoulder to shoulder? I just don't see it happening. I'd like to be wrong about it, but I'm not. I'm telling you now. I just don't see these seasons or any type of major social gatherings, even like restaurants where you go in and there's 100 people sitting at various tables. I don't see that type of thing happening, and at least for another year until a vaccine comes out. And we'll talk more about that aspect in a moment. In order for his backers to have negotiating power, he needs these 1,200 delegates, I say. But are we already past where Sanders could have hoped he would be? Think about that. Sanders is talking about staying in this thing to push forward the Democratic platform and all. But I would maintain right now, on the coronavirus alone and our reaction to it, we are far ahead in socialism than I think Sanders could have hoped for in his wildest dreams. And think about this. This is something that I've been talking about a lot and thinking a lot about for the last week, and it really troubles me. We've given away so many of our basic rights, like, say, freedom of assembly, even freedom of speech. I mean, it's hard to even post something on Facebook now without these fact checkers, they had a thing about one I posted. It's talking about an unfair comparison between Obama and Trump's response to the virus. And like I typed on it, how do you have a fact check, a comparison? It's basically an opinion, right? So an opinion can't really be fact checked because it's not claiming to be factual per se. It's an opinion on how the two men handled, the pandemics of their day. It's just crazy. But here's the thing. We really haven't even debated for the rights we've given up. That's what troubles me. We essentially gave up a lot of our rights. And let me say this. I'm not necessarily saying that the events don't dictate the fact that we needed to take some of these things, but literally tell us we can't work, that we can't go to work, we can't spend our money the way we want to, where we want to. I mean, that we have to shelter at home. We're basically all on house arrest. And we've done all this with literally no debate whatsoever. So the idea, if you look at it, and I'll get more into it in just a minute, Sanders has accomplished, and I'm not saying he's for the virus, so don't misunderstand me, but because of the virus, we're closer to outright total socialism than Sanders and his crew possibly could have even hoped for. The party reforms, Mr. Cohen, this fella again, he said, the party, talking about the Democratic Party, reforms go down the drain if Bernie doesn't stay in and get to this 1,200 delegates. Adding that if he drops out before hitting 1,200 delegates, it's going to be Biden's people writing the platform. That's it. So I got to thinking, first of all, political platforms, I hate to tell you, don't mean a whole heck of a lot. I mean, they're established at the party, but you rarely even see them referred to back, even conservatives and Republicans. They'll sometimes tout it, but they don't campaign based on the platform. But what platform does the Democratic Party have? Open borders and free everything? I mean, that doesn't seem to be holding up too well. What about the Green New Deal? Is this their platform? No trucks, no planes, no ships, right? That's what they want. Well, where would New York be right now without truck drivers? New York City and the state of New York without truck drivers or ships for that matter. And how about what they're advocating for right now? They want Donald Trump to nationalize all businesses. And he has done some of that already. And they want the oil industry to be ruined. Well, we talked about this on Friday's show. Check out our podcast. Go directly to John Martin Talks Facebook page. Like it and share it with others. You can check us out on our YouTube channel. Spell it all out, John Martin Talks. And you can, America's Voice News. We have multiple platforms there. Download the free Android and iPhone apps. You can get us on Roku, Fire Stick, Pluto TV, and Dish Network channel 219. And they being America's Voice News, are archiving our shows on their website. And I saw a few people online complain about the networks now breaking away from Donald Trump's news conferences and stuff. If you want to see those in their entirety, check out America's Voice News. They usually play them in their entirety, and they are along many of the Facebook networks as well, including John Martin Talks. But I talked about Friday, the oil industry, and we're not going to get deep into that again, but it is our national oil industry is in peril right now. And lower prices is not necessarily a good thing for it. But the socialists, the Green New Deal, the Ocasio-Cortez, Bernie Sanders preaches against the fossil fuel industry, as he calls it, all the time. So they're getting all the things that they've been wanting. They're getting them now. How about bread lines? We're all standing in bread lines. I mean, classic socialism. You want to see what socialism truly would look like in this country? We're seeing it on a first-hand basis. And of course, they want abortion on demand. I mean, it's amazing how that Pelosi and her bunch want to hold out for more abortion funding in a coronavirus bill that's meant to save lives, unless you're a newborn. And I guess they just take that line. In recent weeks, Sanders has retooled much of his campaign to focus on the coronavirus and workers' rights. He's kind of leading these strikes at Amazon, places like that. Both markings of a candidate running a message candidacy rather than a true race against Biden. It's impossible to run against Biden. There's no more campaigning. He has raised more than listen to this carefully. Bernie Sanders has raised more than $3.5 million for coronavirus aid while ceasing to actively raise money for himself. Don't run. I just had, a little pollen in here. By the way, I went to a particular business this week, over the weekend, and they shot me with one of those thermometers that gauge your temperature before it doesn't touch you, and mine was 96.4. So I guess I'm kind of cooling it right now. But Bernie was able to raise $3.5 million in the last couple of weeks for coronavirus. First, I applaud him for that. I'm not being critical of it, but it shows a couple of things. One, he still has the ability to raise money. Even though he's not raising it directly himself, he's got the ability to raise money. So there's no question if he called for more money for himself, he would probably get it. Now, the only question I have, and I'm not accusing him of anything, is that money, where's that money, that 3.5 going? Is it going directly to charities, or is it going into some type of foundational situation to then be parsed out? Because that's much different deal. If it's going into a foundation, then he can spend money on travel, all kind of stuff. Last weekend, CNN and ABC canceled tentative appearances with Sanders. So, see, they don't think that that Bernie can beat Trump because he can't beat Biden, right? So he can't beat Trump. Therefore, they're not going to cover him. And if he's not a politician, if you're not getting some type of coverage, even if it's negative, you're done, man. The media is more focused on Cuomo. Some of it legit, some of it just because they want he's the fallback position if that Biden collapse comes, which I've already said it's coming. We'll keep you informed about the Wisconsin primary as far as I know. Now, I could be wrong. By the time you see this show, something could have changed, but it is supposed to be tomorrow, and we will certainly cover that. All right, we're going to move on. A Politico story here. New coronavirus funding battle over the November election. Man, oh man, you really need to pay attention to this story, and it's one I'm going to cover every time it pops up because it is literally about the republic. Not just the 2020 Trump election, but about our republic if we can keep it. Consensus is growing that Democrats and Republicans will soon hash out a new coronavirus emergency package number 4, in the coming weeks. But a major obstacle is emerging, the November election. Now, you may recall that there were some elements of the November election in the previous coronavirus packages, but it wasn't enough or didn't go far enough, according to the Democrats. So this is what I've been warning you about for the last couple of weeks. At its essence, what they're talking about here is to going to a straight mail-in ballot. So you won't show up to the polls, won't be early voting, even though that's some of the things extending that. This is straight mail-in ballot, which is different for the most part than we've ever done it before. The difference between an absentee ballot and a straight mail-in ballot is an absentee ballot. You, the voter, must request one from your local supervisor of elections. That is very important. What they're talking about is to direct mail with a return envelope every single registered voter in the country a mail-in ballot, whether you request it or not. Keep in mind, basically half the people don't even bother to vote. They're even registered to vote, not let alone the ones that aren't registered that could be. This opens up to a can of worms, to a ton of fraud. Let's expand upon that. Democrats are making a push to expand funding for vote-by-mail efforts and a 4th emergency rescue package, citing the need to help states prepare to hold elections during the coronavirus pandemic. Now, normally, states pretty much run their own elections based on federal guidelines, but they still run them. The elections carried out as usual could spread the virus this fall. That's what the Democrats are saying, some Republicans. If we have an all mail-in ballot, one virus I know that is going to spread is the virus of socialism. And keep in mind, socialism, and I'll show you this meme up here. When you can vote your way into socialism, But, and that looks like coronavirus protection, right? But you always got to shoot your way out. Every place that has voted their way into socialism has pretty much had to shoot their way out. And Venezuela is feeling that right now. But new vote by mail funding is facing stern resistance from Senate Republicans, I hope so, and the Trump administration, which is true, who argue against imposing federal guidelines on states. The issue may be a sticking point in any relief package as the U.S. faces mass unemployment and plummeting economy. Well, we need to get that back on track as soon as possible. Senator, and who's behind this? And you shouldn't be surprised by this. It's all Democrats for the most part. Senator Amy Klobuchar, Minnesota, in an interview, who is leading a bill with Senator Ron Whiting, Democrat from Oregon, and Chris Coons, what a piece of work he is, Democrat from Delaware, to expand early voting as well as vote by mail. Now, let me tell you, I don't particularly like early voting because it adds so much expense to actual campaigning. It's hard to target early voting. But that horse is out the barn door, and early voting is here. So expanding it some to make it where people don't have to pile up on election day, I can get behind that. Encouraging people to absentee vote, and I can't stress this enough, there is a very big difference between an absentee vote and just general mail-out vote. Absentee, you have to take personal responsibility to request the ballot. And I think there's checks and balances in there that simply don't exist in a mail-in vote. But this is, so according to Ms. Klobuchar, Ms. Klobuchar, she said, we're getting more and more bipartisan support from secretaries of states across the country. Translation, the Republicans are about to cave. They're in the process of caving around the nation. Because the reason I say that is when you hear the term bipartisanship, and I wish it didn't mean this, but it does, it always means Republicans cave. I challenge you, chime in on whatever Facebook network you're listening to right now. Good morning, Citizens for Trump. Howdy, how are you? John Martin Talks. Like it, share it with others. You know, of course, America's Voice News. Love you guys. Media Measures. Chime in on whatever Facebook network you're listening in. Let me know anything you want to talk about, and I will respond to you as quickly as I possibly can. But let me just tell you, bipartisanship always means Republicans cave. Show me, and this is what I would request on Facebook, show me a situation where the Republicans were for something, the Democrats were opposed to it, and the Democrats caved and went with the Republicans. It just doesn't happen. But added Mr. Wyden from Oregon, in the worst case scenario, communities may be facing the choice of either voting by mail or not voting at all. You know, like I say, a lot of people choose not to vote at all. We're already going in this direction, and now we're in the middle of a pandemic, and I think this is a very different time. But so why aren't they advocating for absentee ballots? Why are they not just saying, instead of saying, we're going to mail it out to everyone who, like I say, half of them don't even vote anyway. Why don't they advocate for absentee ballot? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One, Republicans tend to perform better in absentee balloting. That's just kind of a time-honored thing. Secondly, responsibility for the voter to request an absentee ballot. Now, every state has different rules and regulations. But some states, you can just request one and you get one. Most are that way. There's like about a half dozen or so states that you have to actually say why you need one, like I'm going to be out of town or whatever. But surely we could say coronavirus is a threat, and that would be good enough. But the reason they're not advocating for absentee balloting is because they're afraid that their voters, and this is an insult, but it's an insult coming from the Democrats, not from me. I'm just telling you what the insult is. They're telling you that you're not capable of requesting a ballot, that they have to spoon feed you this, and they may be right. But the biggest problem I have with mail out ballots totally, not absentee, is that without requesting them, there is no oversight on these, and they literally could be sold. And I think that if you take an honest assessment of it, and don't even get me started on any kind of internet voting, because we know Russia, 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 right? They the reason Trump won, right? Because of some Facebook ad. So don't even get me started on internet voting. Congress Phase 3, $2 trillion plus coronavirus package passed last week, allocated $400 million to election security grants, which can be used broadly, including to expand vote by mail option and early voting, as well as to clean polling facilities, conduct public education campaigns. So the Republicans, to a certain extent, have already caved on some of this aspect. The question is how much. Now, $400 million is not enough by any means to do all-out nationwide mail-in voting. So there would still have to be some caving to come, which concerns me. But Democrats assert, I love this paragraph, Democrats assert that money is not nearly enough for states to adjust to the risk associated with the pandemic and are pushing for far, far more. Let me ask you something. Let me just tell you, you want me to give you some words? I'd be willing to bet you on this. Some words you will never hear a Democratic elected official ever utter. I don't think it's ever been uttered in history of this country. For a Democratic election official to say, we have all the money we need. We don't need any more tax money. We don't need any more grant money. We've got all the money we need. Tell me, have you ever, you don't hear too many politicians saying that, but I don't think I've ever heard a Democratic politician say, we got all we need, man. We don't need any more money. They're always going to want more money. You could give them that $2 trillion. We give them $2 trillion. They still want more. Citing the move by some Republicans to delay primaries amid coronavirus concerns, Klobuchar said that she is looking at the next package to get the funding included. We need more. As well as some additional reforms like removing state requirements that voters present to excuse for absentee ballot. I don't particularly have an issue with that. But my thing is, if you're not responsible enough to request a ballot, then to me, every American citizen is capable of that. If you can't request a ballot, I question whether you should even be, it just bothers me. Corona fear could be an easy excuse. If you have to have an excuse, just let that be one of them. Can't see anybody saying that wouldn't be. But the idea of a straight mail-in ballot is, according to this article, said that's landing with a thud with the Republicans who control the Senate. Says Senator Lamar Alexander, Republican of Tennessee, he said that's premature. Around the world, we've had people in new democracies go to vote when their lives were at risk because the right to vote was so precious. Most Americans, according to Mr. Alexander, would be very skeptical of significant changes in our ability to cast a ballot in person, certainly at this point. I'm not so sure he's correct about that, based on the reaction of people to coronavirus, and as I said earlier, how much we've been willing to get rid of it. But here, we'll close with this. I want to tell you what Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden had to say about it. Both Speaker Nancy Pelosi and presidential primary frontrunner Joe Biden are making the case for an expansion of mail-in voting. Pelosi has suggested that as much as $4 billion in funding could be needed. Now, Nancy Pelosi, I got this picture of this meme of her. It shows you about everything you need to know about her. Anybody she puts her own agenda ahead of the agenda of the nation. The Democratic Party's done that. Remember her main guy and Biden's right-hand man, Jim Clyburn, talked about the coronavirus is a great opportunity to push forward our vision. Not helping American people, but the progressive Democratic Party's vision for America. And then, of course, Joe Biden, if you ask him, well, what do you feel about Joe? He's probably going to say, well, it depends. Joe Biden, man, I mean, you're going to put this dude in charge of anything? Really? Are you really telling me, and I can't help but ask this every so often, if you're out there supporting Joe Biden, really? Do you hate Donald Trump so much that you would put a guy who you wouldn't even leave him, in charge of your kids to babysit in charge of the White House? Really? I don't know. All right, we're going to move on to our last story here. And this comes to you from The Hill. It's Dr. Fauci. Fauci says it's likely coronavirus will be seasonal. In other words, it's going to be here for a while. National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease Director Anthony Fauci said Sunday that it is likely the coronavirus will become a seasonal occurrence. Well, there's really little doubt about this. You know, there's a reason why they call it COVID-19, because it's the 19th version of this basic coronavirus. This thing has been around for a while. This latest kind of mutation, if you want to call it that, or aberration of it, is more, appears to be more infectious. But the coronavirus has been around for a long, long time. The infectious disease expert told CBS, talking about Mr. Fauci, faced the nation that it's likely the virus will assume a seasonal nature because it's unlikely to be contained around the world this year. Some say it's already seasonal. There's evidence that this particular strain of the coronavirus has been around for a while now, and it just, for whatever reason, popped up even more. Maybe because they were eating the bats or whatever in China, I guess. But Fauci said, unless we get this globally under control, there is a very good chance that it'll assume a seasonal nature. Well, we're going to have to develop a vaccine. But here's the thing, a vaccine is not a cure in general. There are vaccines that are cures. But if you think about it from the aspect of flu, because this is basically, and I'm not trying to give you, I'm not a doctor, let me say that. I don't play one on TV or whatever, but I can read and I can listen and I can separate the wheat from the chaff, which is harder to do these days, but I can still do it. The flu shot. The flu shot does not stop you from getting the flu. You can still get the flu with the flu shot. The flu shot is the best guess they make based on last year's flu. The flu comes back every year in different versions, right? So the vaccine, I'm not downplaying the need for a flu shot. I'm simply saying it is not a panacea for the flu. And I don't think, based on what I've seen, that any of the things they're working on now would be really any different with this corona COVID-19. It would essentially be a flu shot type vaccination that would curtail your chances of getting the flu, and maybe if you did get the flu, it wouldn't be as bad. That's basically, as I understand it, the parameters of what they're working on this. So it's not like some other viral infection, so we'll see. But Fauci went on to say we need to be prepared that since it will be unlikely to be completely eradicated from the planet, that as we get into the next season, we may see the beginning of a resurgence. I just don't see that there's any doubt in that. That's one of the reasons why I was saying I don't see us having any of these group activities until we get a vaccine, or at least people feel more comfortable. And some of these types of things may not come back ever, or certainly not come back the same way. But there's going to be a resurgence, and it's going to bring up a couple questions that we need to answer, or at least begin to ask ourselves, and I'll get into that in just a moment. Fauci also said on the Sunday morning show that it would be a false statement to say the U.S. government has the coronavirus pandemic under control. Well, the pandemic, let's just first of all get a definition of pandemic, because it's not necessarily what you think. It doesn't mean that everybody's dying. Pandemic is of disease. This is the textbook definition, prevalent over a whole country or the world. So the definition of pandemic means that people are catching it literally all over any particular country, in this case, all over the world. Doesn't mean necessarily that we're all going to die, and we are someday. But here's the thing. I'm going to skip forward to the end of this thing because we're about out of time. The U.S. has counted more than 321,000 cases of coronavirus. Of course, these numbers are fluctuating, leading to at least 9,132 deaths, according to data from Johns Hopkins University. So here's the deal, ladies and gentlemen, and I'll close out the show with this. We have some choices to make, and I'm going to bring up two memes of founding fathers. The first one is Benjamin Franklin. We have to ask ourselves about trading security, safety, for freedom, because that's what we're doing on a daily basis right now. Make no mistake about it, we are doing exactly what Mr. Franklin said, and he's a much smarter man than me, and he told you that if we do that, we're going to get neither safety nor freedom. All right. Now, the next one I want to put up there is our good friend Patrick Henry. Howdy, Pat. Patrick Henry. A lot of people just attribute to give me liberty or give me death, but we need to look at this. He's saying, is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains, slavery, forbid Almighty God? I do not know what course others may take, but as far as me, give me liberty or give me death. What he's basically saying there is existence for him is not enough. That if he can't exist as a free man, then he doesn't necessarily want to exist at all. So we've got to answer these questions, and we're not really even asking them right now, which is the most troubling thing to me. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the show as much as I've enjoyed bringing it to you. Please go directly to John Martin Talks Facebook page, like it, and share it with others. Thank you so much for our growing audience every day. I'll pray for your family. You pray for mine. But above all else, like I say each and every day, from my heart, from my family to yours, have a blessed day.